They shot her at point-blank range, straight through the chest, and left her bleeding inside a burned-out farmhouse while laughing over the radio, snapping photos of her body, calling it confirmation before moving on to their next target. But the thing about shooting a Navy SEAL in the heart is, you'd better make sure that heart actually stops, because Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance wasn't finished yet. Before we show you how she turned her own funeral into their personal nightmare, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because this story doesn't end zipped in a body bag. It ends reminding us that some hearts simply don't know when to quit, even when they should. Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance didn't like the way the air felt. Too still, too clean. The convoy route wound through a forgotten stretch of the Carpathian Ridge, a place that had changed flags more times than anyone could count, clinging to cliffs and dirt tracks held together by prayers and Soviet gravel. Officially, it was a NATO joint patrol, just another routine sweep. Unofficially, Tessa had walked through minefields that felt safer. She leaned against the matte green MRAP, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Her team was tight. 8 SEALs, 3 Polish Grom operators, and a handful of local contractors whose mismatched boots and patches didn't inspire confidence. Chief Mason appeared beside her, square-jawed and silent. He nodded toward the lead vehicle, where one of the contractors fiddled with a drone case. "Still not convinced about these guys?" he asked. Tessa's lips barely moved. "Their gear's too clean." One of them called a magazine a clip. Mason almost smiled. "You always this paranoid?" When 9 Americans get ambushed on a friendly route, paranoia's just pattern recognition. The dry grass shifted against rusted fencing. No wind, no birds, no locals. She tapped the digital map on her wrist. "This stretch is supposed to be IED country. Intel says last week's convoy hit 2 bombs here." "Maybe someone cleared it," Mason offered. "Yeah, but who?" One of the contractors approached. Tall, sharp haircut, East Coast accent, sleeves rolled high to reveal forearm ink, a lion's head marked with Cyrillic letters. It didn't sit right with her. "Ma'am, drones are airborne. Full satellite uplink," he said. Tessa studied him. "Name?" "Reed." "You've run this route before?" "Twice. Smooth both times." "Funny. That's not what Intel said." Reed shrugged. "Then maybe Intel was wrong." She didn't answer. Just let the silence stretch until Mason cut in. "Ma'am, we moving?" Tessa scanned the landscape one last time. Ridges, old farmhouses, bends in the dirt road that felt staged. "Yeah. Mount up." The team moved with practiced precision, every motion sharp and automatic. Engines roared to life, dust swirling from the gun truck's tires as if trying to hide something. Tessa climbed into the lead MRAP, settling behind the gunner's platform, her fingers tapping the dash, not from nerves, but calibration. Mason leaned in. "You thinking it's a trap?" "I'm thinking nobody needs to fake a war out here. There's enough real ones buried under this dirt. And if it goes loud, we don't wait for permission." The convoy rolled forward. The line of vehicles stretched thin, too open, too vulnerable. Behind them, Reed's drone hummed overhead. Ahead, the stillness held its breath, and somewhere deep in Tessa Vance's chest, instincts tapped out Morse code in her pulse. Not fear, just the rhythm of someone who'd survived too much to ignore the silence before it breaks. The first 20 minutes crawled by in a silence so dense it made your teeth ache. Engines droned, radios crackled. The convoy crept forward. Tessa sat with her rifle resting across her lap, eyes never still. Convoy 1, status green, Mason called. His thumb tapped the receiver twice, his tell. Copy, status green. They rounded a tight corner where rock pressed hard against the road. Then the world erupted. The lead MRAP ahead vanished in a bloom of fire and twisted steel. The explosion hurled armor plates skyward like shrapnel confetti, the shockwave slamming into her vehicle hard enough to crack her spine against the seat. The windshield splintered into a spiderweb. IED! IED! Contact front! Mason's voice roared. Gunfire followed in clean, controlled bursts from the ridgeline. Not the wild kind of spray-and-pray gunfire, but precise, coordinated volleys that sealed off every escape route as if the ambush had been rehearsed for weeks. Ambush! Left ridge! Chief Mason shouted, yanking the gunner into position as the 50 cal roared to life, muzzle flashes strobing off the rocks while empty shells rained like metallic hail. Through the fractured windshield, Tessa Vanceman caught sight of the contractors, 3 of them backing away from the fight. One dropped his rifle entirely. Another barked into a handset she didn't recognize. Mason! Eyes on those contractors! They're pulling back! She yelled. Copy! He snapped, swinging fire across the ridge as grenades thumped and machine guns chewed the ground, dirt spitting around the tires like the earth itself was trying to spit them out. Tessa kicked open the door and dropped behind the MRAP's wheel well, lungs burning from dust and cordite. A few yards ahead, Petty Officer Vickers lay bleeding, a red bloom spreading fast across his thigh. Stay with me, she called, dragging him in with strength her frame had no right to have, pressing gauze hard against the wound as blood soaked through her gloves. Then came a sound that sliced through the chaos, a single, sharp crack, clean and deliberate. The impact hit like a hammer to the chest, knocking the air out of her lungs as the round smashed into her armor and drove deep. The world tilted, the edges blurring. For a heartbeat, she saw only the fractured blue sky through black smoke. Mason's voice exploded over comms, ragged and urgent. Commander down! Commander down! The SEALs tightened their lines, pulling the wounded into cover, but the enemy fire grew harsher, more disciplined, inching closer. Tessa tried to breathe, but her chest burned like white fire. Blood filled her mouth as her fingers clawed instinctively at her vest, feeling the shattered ceramic plate and the burning hole near where her heart should be. Vision closing, sound fading, the last thing she caught before darkness crept in was Mason's voice holding steady through the storm, and laughter. The men on the ridge were laughing, certain the woman who'd held the line was finally gone. Muffled explosions pulsed like distant drums, while her heart beat louder than the heavy gun above. Tessa Vance lay flat, armor cracked, chest crushed with pain so sharp it felt like her lungs were filled with glass. She wheezed, blood bubbling at her lips, hands trembling but mind steady. The body breaks before the will does. Her father's voice came back, calm and clear from years ago during drown-proofing drills. Don't listen to the body. She blinked through the blur. Her vest had stopped the round, but it cracked the plate and shattered ribs, puncturing a lung. Yet her heart was still beating, and that meant she wasn't done. She forced her arm to move. Pain tore through her side, but her hand obeyed, clawing into the dirt for anchor. She turned her head, catching a glimpse of the fight through the haze, her team falling back, Mason hauling a wounded man into cover, gunfire flashing from the ridges, enemy silhouettes darting between rocks. Then she heard it, closer, calmer than the rest. Confirm her, chest shot. Nobody survives that. Boots scraped against gravel. A shadow loomed. Tessa slowed her breathing, chest rising just enough to stir the dust, blood streaking down her chin. She let her head fall limp against the ground, playing dead because moving meant dying for real. Through half-closed eyes, she saw one of them kneel beside her, masked, rifle slung low, radio crackling on his shoulder. "Primary target neutralized," he said flatly. Another voice echoed through the comms, distant but clear. "Copy. Collect her gear, we'll stage the bodies after." The man tugged at her vest straps, rolling her slightly, pain detonating through her ribs as her body screamed to fight, to grab his throat, to end him. But instinct, cold and disciplined, overruled. Not yet. Overruled. Not yet. The boots moved away. 2 sets, then 3, scraped gravel as they carried another body off, voices fading with each step. She swallowed blood and grit, forcing everything down to focus on one thing only, her pulse. Not the chaos around her. Not the pain. Not the warmth soaking through her fatigues. Just that steady drum beneath her ribs. Slower. Heavier. Still there. "You're not dead until you decide to stop fighting," her father's voice said in her head, and her right hand found dirt, palm pressing hard. She braced and inched herself an inch into the shallow shadow of the MRAP's wheel well, that unnoticed patch of cover becoming her refuge. Every tiny movement cost more agony than most people feel in a lifetime, and then voices crept back, sharper now. The enemy was closing, stepping over gravel with the careful patience of hunters. She was bleeding out fast. "Trail runs east. Follow it. Sweep the kill zone. Confirm all." Her vision blurred. Blackness crept in at the edges. She clenched her teeth until her jaw ached, refusing to let the dark take her. If they reached her, they'd learn this heart wasn't done. Tessa Vance stilled her breath. Blood pooled under her vest as she narrowed her eyes in that thin strip of shade. She wasn't going to run. Not yet. If they hauled her body away, they'd find out just how very alive she still was. They dragged her like luggage, one man on each arm. Boots scraped. The vest caught on rocks and dirt as they hauled her toward the burned-out shell of a farmhouse overlooking the road. The building looked as if a mortar had taken it years ago. Walls half standing, a roof long gone. Soot clung to cracked stone. "She's lighter than I expected," one muttered, his accented English polished but rough. "How the hell did this one lead a team? Special forces types are overrated," the other said with a mocking tone. "They break like everyone else, especially the women." Tessa kept her body limp and breathed shallow. She counted steps, memorized turns, felt weight shifts in their grips. Her head lolled to the side so she could see the dark smear of blood she was leaving in the dust. A deliberate trail, misleading like her pulse. They dumped her into what used to be a living room. Broken floorboards, charred rafters, a dusty beam sagging low enough it might cave if anyone breathed too hard. "Let her bleed out," one said. "We'll stage the photos when she's gone." A camera clicked, plastic, commercial grade. She opened one eye just a crack and caught the lens aimed square at her chest. The cracked vest, the blood-stained collar, the trident badge barely visible under torn webbing. "They'll believe she died instantly," the first voice said. "Chest wound. Everyone accepts that. Nobody survives a round through the heart." "Except she doesn't look dead," a new voice said from the doorway, heavier footsteps approaching. "Let me check." Reed. She knew that voice. Too smooth, too confident. "You already got the pictures," the first one replied. "What more do you need?" Intel said she might have seen something before the ambush. The words landed like lead. Tessa's heart slammed, not with fear, but with confirmation. They hadn't come simply to kill. They'd come to erase. Erase what she'd seen. Erase what she knew. The convoy hadn't been a random ambush. This wasn't battlefield chaos. It was deliberate. Arms trafficking. Betrayal from the inside. That drone feed earlier? It hadn't just been mapping terrain. It had been syncing with something. Off-grid comms, private channels. Someone didn't want her reporting it. Was she carrying anything? Reed asked. Radio, sidearm, bloodied to hell. We dumped it. Any recovered footage? No body cam. She ditched it. Reed clicked his tongue, disappointed. We needed her to vanish quietly. Now we have to stage the scene. Locals can do it. Blame the militia. Same playbook. She was the only one carrying the Balkan files. If she went down, the mission would vanish with her. And Tessa forced her face to stay slack even as the realization sank in that they already knew. They knew what she'd been assigned to dig into. They assumed she was out cold, that the blood made her weak, that a hole in her chest meant she was finished. They were wrong, and when one of them leaned in too close, they'd learn just how wrong. Reed knelt beside her. She could feel his breath, the bitter tang of coffee and nicotine on his jacket as he tapped her vest. Bulletproof ain't the same as heartproof, he said, then almost reverently, too bad. She looked like she could survive anything. He stood. Finish it. Burn the place. Footsteps receded and Tessa cracked an eye open and started to move. The floor bit into her back with splintered wood. Light shifting through the broken rafters as gold-tinged dust settled into the ruin. She lay where they'd left her, blood drying at her throat, the vest buckled just enough to show the cracked trauma plate beneath. Her chest felt as if someone had lit a small fire inside it and ordered her not to move. Each breath hissed through clenched teeth, but it was still breath, and she was still here. She reached inward, not to think, but to find center, to separate pain from purpose. Slow, shallow breaths, anchoring to one point at a time. Memories came. Week 5 surf, frozen sand, drown-proofing with Instructor Keith and his prosthetic leg, who ran them 10 miles barefoot to prove mindset beat muscle. And his mantra returned. Your body will scream that it's dying, but your job is to move anyway. Tessa moved. Just a little. Fingers curling over splintered floor, testing, then sliding an arm beneath her to fish for anything sharp. A broken beam, a nail, then metal under her palm. A rifle, unloaded, safety off, probably left by one of the idiots who thought she was done. She checked the chamber, empty, but the magazine pouch stayed latched on the sling. God bless laziness. She rolled like a corpse easing out of rigor, one elbow then the other, hauling her torso upright as ribs screamed and the world spun. She bit her lip hard enough to draw blood just to stay conscious. Footsteps sounded outside. Casual, confident, 2 men, one humming, one on a radio. Told you, dead as hell. Nobody survives a hit like that, one said. Wrap her and dump the body, burn the rest. Zero evidence. A man stepped through the blown doorway with a rifle slung across his chest, not even looking directly at the pack on the ground, the same one they'd ripped from her an hour earlier. He turned his back. Big mistake. Tessa moved up fast, half staggering, half driving on pure will. Pain threatened to black her out, but her hand had already closed on the magazine. She slammed it into the rifle, racked the slide, and put a round clean into the base of the first man's skull before he could finish turning. The second barely had a finger to the trigger when her second round punched into his clavicle. Her third shot tapped the head, and he dropped like a sandbag. Silence fell, broken only by the sharp rasp of her breath. Ragged breath, and the slow, steady drip of blood from her vest onto the floorboards. 3 minutes passed like that. She kept perfectly still until a voice crackled over the enemy radio clipped to the fallen man's chest. "Confirm execution." "Where's the photo?" someone asked. Tessa snatched the radio and pressed the send button, her voice flat and cold. "This is Vance. You shot me in the chest. You should have aimed higher." Static filled the line, then silence. No jokes, no laughter, just panic seeping through like gas in a closed room. She stripped the first man's kit from his corpse, snapping open the utility belt and pulling only what she needed. Fresh mags, a sidearm, a knife, a flashbang, and a few painkillers followed. She ground 2 pills between her molars. Not enough to fix what was broken, just enough to keep her upright. Tessa glanced at her vest. Split clean, ceramic shattered and soaked red, but the trident badge over her heart still shone. The plate was cracked, but the symbol held. Her ribs could be broken, her lung punctured, but her will remained. So did the fight. If anyone wanted a heart to break, they'd chosen the wrong one. The farmhouse wasn't much, but for now it was hers. She moved like a machine that had been hit too many times, yet refused to stop. Each step deliberate, each breath measured, pain a constant pressure behind her ribs and a throb under her collarbone she now wore like armor. From the dead men, she salvaged 2 rifles, 3 loaded magazines, a half-empty medkit, and a comms radio still tuned to the enemy net. Crouched by a crumbling wall, she flipped it open. Static fizzed. Then a clipped voice cut through. "Confirm kill." "No photos received. You're running out of time," another answered, nervous, unfamiliar. "Team 3 went dark. No visual on target body. She might have... Negative. She's dead. Shot through the heart. Finish cleanup. Burn everything." Tessa smiled through blood-slick teeth. They still thought she was a ghost with a clock ticking above her head, and that belief would be their undoing. She keyed the mic, voice steady and low. "This is Vance. I told you already. Next time, aim higher." 5 seconds of dead air, then frantic noise. "She's alive? How is she alive? Sweep the farmhouse. Move now." Tessa tossed the radio aside. Less than 2 minutes to act. She started with the door, wedging a broken beam at shoulder height and tying it with paracord to a grenade pin so anyone forcing it would take the blast in the chest. Next came the stairs, a tripwire at the base rigged to a flashbang nested in a rusty tin can. Non-lethal, but blinding enough to buy her time. Upstairs, if it could be called that, was a collapsed loft with a crawl space just big enough for a firing nest. She propped a busted chair leg to hold a shutter open for sight. Her rifle rested on that improvised perch, muzzle steady, sight lines locked on the narrow road below. Everything else, empty bottles, shattered glass, a charred blanket, became camouflage to hide her movement and conceal reloads. She waited not like prey, but like a spider, patient and still. The first man slipped through the window. Quiet, knife in hand, no radio chatter. She put a round through his temple before his boots hit the floor. Then the door detonated. Her trap worked. The grenade tore half the entrance apart and sent a second man crashing into the wall hard enough to splinter wood. He didn't rise. The enemy radio screamed in panic. "Team 4, status," she keyed from her prone position upstairs, voice low and steady. "Down 2, request immediate reinforcements." "I'm still here," came the taunt over the enemy net. "You're bluffing. Come find out." She moved again, fast despite the fire behind her ribs, sliding to the corner where moonlight leaked through gaps in the roof and cast thin ribbons across the floor. Outside, she could hear them now, shouting and arguing, someone losing control. And that was exactly what she wanted. Anger makes people sloppy. A voice cut the night, pumped through a portable loudspeaker. "Lieutenant Vance, last chance. You're wounded, surrounded, no escape." She said nothing. Instead, she tossed a flare into the courtyard so it bloomed a blinding red, then dropped a second flare and shot the third clean through a man's throat as he tried to flank right. A fourth screamed and ran, and she let him go. Fear would spread the message for her. Inside the farmhouse, her chest ripped with every breath, each inhale a knife, but her mind stayed sharp. She was no longer merely surviving. She was shaping the battlefield, flipping the kill box they'd dragged her into so that now the farmhouse was a trap, and she held the trigger. Then a shot cracked the night, sharp, clean, impossibly close. A round slammed into the wooden beam inches above her head and showered her in splinters. She hit the floor with her breath caught and knew this wasn't the same crew she'd been bleeding against all night. This was someone patient, someone else. She thumbed the enemy radio next to her and swapped frequencies. A new voice drifted in, calm and smooth, not panicked like the others. The last shot had been a warning. She didn't answer the bait. The voice said, "You're clever. I'll give you that. Farmhouse traps, the fake death, the calm stunt. I've seen it before." She stayed silent until he added, "I don't rush, I don't shout, and I don't miss twice." And she recognized the cadence of a marksman's ego disguised as respect. She raised the mic slowly and said low and steady, "I'm not like the ones you killed. Let's see what happens when neither of us misses." A short chuckle came back, and a name. Victor Kaas, Finnish Special Forces. Retired early with wealthy clients. "You?" the man asked. "Lieutenant Commander Tessa Vance, United States Navy SEAL," she answered. And when he said, "Ah, the Iron Heart," she realized they'd already been trading nicknames. She eased away from his sight line and crawled toward the side window. She didn't need to find him yet, only to make him think she was trying. "You know I've got you boxed in," Victor said, and she angled a shard of broken car glass as a mirror through the gap in the frame to scan. Movement on the top of the northern ridge, maybe 200 meters out. A half-crouched silhouette between two pines, long barrel, no muzzle flash, suppressed. Good position, low wind, but arrogance was the mistake. He talked too much, so she moved. Out through a hole in the side wall, low across broken soil, using collapsed stone fencing to mask her silhouette. Her rifle strapped to her back for balance rather than firepower, because at 200 meters she couldn't outgun him, but she could outwalk him. She circled wide through a dry creek bed, each step deliberate, breath burning, chest aching, moving like a ghost, slow, inevitable, until she reached the base of the ridge, paused, listened as he shifted, then climbed fast and low, weaving between boulders. 50 meters, 30, 10, she heard him exhale, slow, centered, drawing his breath for another shot. Then she rose from the slope like smoke with her rifle aimed dead center as his head turned. His eyes widened, and she fired once, center mass. The round slammed into him hard enough to drop his scope. He stumbled back against the tree, but his armor caught the hit and held. He reached for his sidearm, fast and trained, but her second shot ripped into his upper thigh, and he screamed as he fell. She closed the last few feet while he crawled toward his rifle. She kicked it away. He looked up, pain smeared across his face. disbelief swirling in his eyes. "How?" he rasped. Tessa Vance Calquita stood over him, chest heaving, rifle aimed steady. "I moved," she said simply. He tried to grin through blood. "You're not supposed to be alive." She tilted her head slightly. "That's the problem with shooting someone in the chest. You assume you hit the heart." Then she pulled the trigger. One clean, professional shot, like everything she'd done tonight. She slung the sniper's rifle across her shoulder and stepped back into the trees. No words left to say. The man who thought he could end her with one bullet had just learned what the world was about to find out. The Iron Heart doesn't stop until the mission's over. Dawn broke across the ridge as a blacked-out helicopter swept low, blades slicing mist like razors. It had taken 2 encrypted bursts to reach them, one from the stolen enemy radio, another from the sealed beacon in her belt pouch reserved for no-fail extractions. She watched it descend over the last rise, rotors throwing up dust and pine needles, shaking the trees like they recognized who was returning. Tessa didn't wave, didn't signal, just stood there in the clearing, vest torn open, sniper rifle slung across her back like a trophy. The first man out was Martin d'Ambitson Chief Mason. He slowed, blinked, stepped toward her like walking into a dream. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "I'm fine," she said, though her ribs were fractured, shoulder bruised black, skin over her sternum a swollen mess of burns and impact trauma. But she was standing, and that mattered more than anything. Behind Mason, NATO reinforcements spread out, weapons up, sweeping perimeters. Medics moved in fast and silent. "What happened?" Mason asked. Tessa handed him the comms unit she'd taken from the farmhouse, then the sniper's radio, then a blood-slick tablet filled with terrain scans, routes, and payout logs, encrypted but damning. "Contractors were paid to stage the ambush," she said. "Someone with reach wanted me gone." Mason didn't speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was tight. "They shot you point blank. Chest plate." She looked down. The ceramic shattered like a spider web. The trident badge smeared in blood but still intact. "It missed the heart," she said. A medic stepped forward to guide her to the evac bird, but stopped short when he saw her up close. Not just the blood, but the way she stood, the steadiness in her eyes. "Sir," the medic whispered to Mason, thinking she couldn't hear. "That wound. How the hell is she still on her feet?" Mason didn't answer. He just looked at her, not with pity, not concern, but something closer to awe. Behind them, the surviving SEALs from the convoy appeared, some limping, others bandaged and pale but alive. When they saw her, they froze, even those who'd seen her drop from that sniper's round. Even the ones who'd heard the radio call, "Commander down," stood frozen, staring at her like they were witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. One of the Polish Grom operators murmured a phrase in his own language, and another translated softly, reverently, "Heart of steel." "No," Chief Mason corrected quietly, his gaze fixed on her. "Heart of iron." Tessa Vance didn't answer. She just kept walking toward the helicopter, boots dragging through the dirt, her body fueled only by spite, breath, and the final drops of adrenaline. The nickname caught fire before she even stepped aboard. Iron Heart. Whispers rippled through the ranks, low mutters over radio channels. No one said it to her directly. They didn't need to. She heard it, and for the first time in hours, something deep inside her unclenched. Not the pain, but the question that had been pounding behind her ribs since that first shot tore the sky apart. Did it matter that I kept going? Now she knew. It did. She sat on the floor of the chopper as it lifted off, blood soaking through the gauze across her chest, her eyes fixed on the open door as the farmhouse vanished beneath a rising storm of dust. She didn't speak, didn't nod, didn't even blink. Mission complete. Heart still beating. Could you keep fighting with a bullet lodged inches from your heart like Tessa did? Would you have the clarity to trap a house, outthink a sniper, and walk away with proof while bleeding the entire time? Tell us in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story reminded you that survival isn't always about strength, but about refusing to stop when you should be finished, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss one of our missions. Share this video with someone who needs to remember. The heart only stops when you let it. And since Old Bill's Tales uploads every day, your next mission's already waiting. Watch one of the videos appearing on your screen now, and I'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, with a brand new story.